The Springald in Age of Empires 4 has been terrorizing the battlefield since the pros have discovered their effectiveness pretty soon after the game has launched. The unit that was supposed to be a way of handling enemy siege units from range in the Castle Age suddenly became the spammed unit that decimated every target from distance. Thankfully, the developers have reworked the Springald to take us out of that meta. But how good are the new Springalds, and are they still overpowered like before? Welcome to Age of Noob everyone, and let's take a closer look into the new Springald changes. Alright, before we begin, let's talk stats first and what changes have been implemented to the Springald. Previously, the Springald costed 200 wood and 200 gold apiece for a total of 400 resources. The developers have nerfed them by increasing the cost of each resource by 50 for a total of 500 resources. Furthermore, the damage they deal to enemy units has been reworked. Previously, the Springald had a base damage of 60 and a bonus damage of 20 versus siege. This meant that the Springald dealt 80 damage to siege units before armor and 60 to all other units. The new Springald, on the other hand, has its base damage reduced from 60 to 30, but its bonus damage to siege increased from 20 to a whopping 90 damage. And finally, the speed of the Springald was marginally decreased to 3.7 tiles per second, down from 4. On paper, Springalds do 40 more damage to siege while only doing half the damage to all other units than before. But how do these changes alter their effectiveness versus units? As always, let's find out through some tests. This time, the tests will be different. The Springalds are meant to be used from distance, which means I will be testing their ability to bring down targets in the minimum amount of hits. Since Springalds cannot miss in Age of Empires 4, their number of shots as a metric will be easier to test. This should give you a rough idea of how quickly you'll bring down targets should they choose to engage against your Springalds. I'll also incorporate some practical scenarios as well to see how halving their damage against other non-siege units affects their playstyle. Let's start with the infantry. Against a Castle Age upgraded Spearman, the Springald does 28 damage since 2 is negated by the blacksmith upgrades. However, it does not matter practically, as with or without the extra armor, the Spearman goes down in 4 hits. Previously, only 2 hits were required. Against the men-at-arms, the Springald now takes 7 hits to bring them down and 8 hits once upgraded via the blacksmith. Previously, upgraded in the blacksmith or not, it only took them 3 hits to bring down the man-at-arms. This is a massive difference of more than double the hits. Against the Landsknechts, it takes 1 extra hit to bring them down, up from 2 to 3 hits. It does not matter if they are upgraded or not, they will die in 3 hits regardless. Okay, now let's move on to range units. Since the veteran archers and the crossbowmen are both identical in terms of HP and armor to the Landsknechts, they also die in 3 hits now, as opposed to the previous 2 hits. This outcome, of course, doesn't change with the blacksmith upgrades either. The hand cannoneers can now tank up to 5 hits when unupgraded and 6 hits once upgraded in the blacksmith. Previously, they died in only 3 hits regardless of whether or not they were upgraded in the blacksmith. Alright, now let's move on to the cavalry. The scout cavalry has the same HP and armor as the spearmen, so their results are also identical. Regardless of the blacksmith upgrades, they used to die in 2 hits, but now they die in 4 instead. The reworked and quite frankly butchered Horseman would have died in only 3 hits previously, but now die with 5 hits. Blacksmith upgrades also don't change the outcome here. And finally, the Knight. They used to go down in only 5 hits, but can now tank up to 9 hits when unupgraded and a whopping 10 hits once blacksmith upgrades kick in. Being able to tank an extra shot or 2 is way different than tanking an extra 5. This is huge. Of course, what's not captured here is the retention of your critical mass, i.e. previously charging with your man-at-arms against the Springalds would have dwindled your numbers low enough for your opponent's melee units to clean up the rest of the man-at-arms. But the effective double HP buffer now will make it much more difficult for the Springalds to dwindle your number as you charge against them. This is the real intended change, and of course, it's still good to know in the back of your head roughly how many hits each unit can tank now. Use this information wisely before you decide to charge against their army of Springalds. Alright, so that was the nerf component of the Springalds, but they were also buffed against siege in the recent patch as well. But how big of a difference does this make? Well, let's find out. Previously, the battering ram was able to tank a whopping 14 hits from the Springalds, regardless of it being the previous 900 HP 15 armor ram or the current 700 HP 30 armor ram. Hence, it was a great way to soak up the Springald damage for sure, and you were able to comfortably push with your rams into the enemy base. However, with the most recent change to both the rams and the Springald, the rams now go down in only 8 hits. This is massive, as 8 Springalds can now one-shot a ram. This means that if you don't have a lot of rams pushing in, or don't have means of sniping enemy Springalds, your rams will melt away before you can dish out any serious damage. Hence, be very careful of a handful of enemy Springalds if your only siege weapon is the ram, and don't even think about it if they're masked and well defended with spears. Rams in low numbers are not the way to go anymore if you can't snipe enemy Springalds. That said, once you get the Siege Works upgrade from the Siege Workshop, the Rams can tank an additional 2 hits for a total of 10 hits. Siege Works is a fairly cheap technology, so it's definitely worth picking up if you're up against many Springolds and are going for Rams yourself. Moving on to the Mangonels, they are now destroyed in only 3 hits, down from the previous 4 hits. Also note that the Mangonel is left with only 16 HP after the second shot, so if it's even slightly damaged, the Springald can easily 2-shot the Mangonel down. Furthermore, Mangonels take 6 shots to take down a Springald, and their base reload time is roughly 50% more as well. Hence, choosing to engage against the Springalds with the Mangonels is a really bad idea unless you really outnumber your opponent and somehow manage to close the gap. The Siegeworks upgrade has no impact on the outcome here, so it doesn't help the Mangonels against Springalds when full HP. Next up is the Cannoneer Trebuchet. Previously, Springolds were able to bring down the Trebuchets in 6 hits, but now it's down to just 4. The Siegeworks upgrade allows the Trebs to tank 1 additional hit from the Springolds. Now, if your Trebuchets are already deployed and you just realize a group of Springolds firing at your Trebuchets, don't be afraid to fling a volley at one of the Springolds. Yes, their accuracy is terrible, but if you have 4 or 5 Trebuchets already deployed, it only takes 2 accurate hits to snipe a single Springold. Shoot once and retreat immediately if you cannot deal with the Springolds in another way or repair your Trebuchets. This also may be a better idea once shattering projectiles works properly for the English. Also, remember that you outrange the Springolds by 6 tiles as well, so it may be worth taking a shot before retreating. Again, don't engage against Springolds with your Trebuchets otherwise, as I hope that's already clear enough. Moving on to the Bombards, they can tank 5 hits now, compared to the 8 hits previously. The Siegeworks upgrade also allows them to tank 1 additional hit. Now remember, Bombards have insane damage, which is why they can 2-shot Springolds. They are, however, twice the cost, take 10 seconds more to train, and attack slightly slower than the Springolds. This engagement will also require a lot of micro to minimize overkill on both sides, so unless you really trust your micro, engaging versus Springolds is a coin flip. The effect of Lanchester's laws is a bit brutal here, so I'll caution against this. Okay, now let's check out the cannon, which is the French unique unit. The Springolds can bring them down in 3 hits instead of the previous 5. That said, the cannons one-shot the Springolds. Hence, in equal numbers or in equal resources, engaging against the French cannons is a bad idea. You really have to have a large numbers advantage to fight them head-on cost-effectively. Keep in mind that overkill is possible if your opponents do not micro their cannons properly, but it's not a risk worth taking. Moving on to the Ribauldequin, the Springolds can take down one of those in 4 hits now, compared to the previous 6 hits. Siegeworks allows them to tank 1 extra hit as well. In a 1v1, the Ribauldequin can eventually close the distance and blow up the Springold, but obviously that's not how these 2 units will interact. In numbers, the Ribauldequin are really not great against Springold, so this engagement is very favorable to the Springold player due to the massive range and cost disparity. Hence, you should be comfortable engaging against the Ribauldequins as long as you keep your distance and have decent numbers. Needless to say, engaging with Springolds when heavily outnumbered or when the distance is somehow closed is obviously not advised. The Chinese have their Nest of Bees, of course, and they are awful against Springolds due to their low attack and much lower range. The Springolds can bring down a regular Nest of Bee in just 2 hits now, and a Clock Tower Nest of Bee in 3 hits. If the Chinese opponent does research Siegeworks, then the Nest of Bee can tank 1 more hit. And finally, the Culverin. The Springolds can now take down the Culverin in 4 hits, down from the previous 6. With Siegeworks, the Culverin can now withstand 1 more hit. But this info that I just gave you is almost completely useless because this will never happen. The Culverin outranges the Springold by a comfortable 2 tiles, and they will literally one-shot the Springolds. This means that unless you really outnumber your opponent and are okay with throwing away some of your Springolds to the initial volley or 2 of the Culverins, you should run and never look back. Luckily, the Culverins are very slow and the Springolds can comfortably run away and never take this engagement against them. If your Springolds are caught, however, you're toast. Well, we did skip 1 siege unit, and that is the Springald itself. Previously, 3 hits were required to take down another Springold, but it's down to 2 hits with a new update. However, if your research siege works, you can bring the number of hits back up to 3. Hence, if you have the tech advantage, check the HP and the armor of the enemy Springolds and engage accordingly in equal numbers. Once again, Lanchester's laws will play a big role here. Well, that should cover all the fundamental engagements for the new Springolds. Overall, I think this was a great change, but here are a few important pointers to watch out for. 1. Although the Springold damage to non-siege units was effectively halved, this doesn't mean that you can be sloppy with your army around enemy Springolds. Remember, roughly 4 to 5 of them can still one-shot the majority of units out there. So enemy Springolds can still pick away at your army one by one if you don't have tight control of your units. Hence, don't be sloppy and give the Springalds free hits, as they still do decent damage from a great distance in the Castle Age. Second, the Springalds are so much better against rams now that you have to be a lot more careful if you're using them. Prioritize picking up siege works if you have a decent number of rams and are up against Springalds. Otherwise, your push might come to an abrupt end. And third, Springalds do so much better against almost every siege unit out there right now. The only exceptions to this are specifically the Culverin and the French cannon, which absolutely destroy the Springalds in Imperial Age. Bombards can do pretty okay against them as well, but every other siege unit gets wrecked. Hence, the Springald will still be the go-to anti-siege in the game, especially in the Castle Age and well into the Imperial Age if your opponents cannot make the aforementioned counter units. So, to answer the original question, the new Springalds are still actually very good despite the nerfs. I personally don't believe they are overpowered now, but I can see the developers dropping their siege bonus damage by maybe 10 or 20 damage, as they can bring down really expensive siege units in just a few hits. Regardless, as they stand right now, I think they are at a decent spot. Remember folks, everyone has access to the Springalds, so the easiest answer to Springalds is sometimes Springalds themselves. Well, that's pretty much it for the new changes to the Springalds. I hope you all enjoyed this video as we explore more units and changes in Age of Empires 4. If you have a unit or game mechanic that you'd like me to explore further, let me know in the comment section below. And if you'd like to see more of this type of content, please be sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on any future videos. We've recently hit 15,000 subscribers as well, so I really appreciate all of your support. As always, thanks for watching everyone, and see you all in the next one.
I should have known I'd leave alone. Just goes to show that the blood you bleed is just the blood you